I'm going to regret this.
Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hi, this is Nick Anastasiou, story editor on Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Bad Batch. And you are listening to Aggressive Negotiations.
Bo Shuda, and welcome back to Aggressive Negotiations, the Star Wars podcast that's going to take you on a special ride as we try something a little fresh, a little new, something where we're plumbing hyperspace and finding new routes. How do you pronounce it? You know what? I'm here with pronunciation specialist, Jedi Master Matthew Rushing. Matt, the word R-O-U-T-E. How do you pronounce that word? Like I took a Route 66? Is it Route 66 or Route 66?
That's, yeah.
Does it just depend on the moment?
I guess it depends on the moment. It's kind of like, is it Pirates of the Caribbean or is it the Caribbean? You know, it almost just depends on what you're talking about. I don't know. It's weird, right? Weird.
Well, I mean, the thing is, I consider that authoritatively, Billy Ocean saying Caribbean Queen. So, now we're sharing the same dream. And the dream is for people to go on over to Apple Podcasts and drop us a star rating and review if they haven't yet. We would be your bestest Jedi friends in the world if you did. And of course, you can find us on Twitter at the Jedi Masters. And you can find this fine Nerd Party network at Join Nerd Party or the Nerd Party on Facebook and Instagram. And someday we will have a TikTok dance and we'll unveil it for you. So today's episode is going to be a little bit different. We're going to have a little bit of fun. We all know that we love to surprise each other with topics. So we're going to start off with a surprise topic. We're going to see where this goes. This is going to be a potpourri, Star Wars potpourri episode. And, it's funny you say smell because that's actually the first thing that was knocking around in my brain. Okay.
Oh, no.
All right. So Empire Strikes Back. Let me set the scene. Luke shows up at Cloud City. And he's going along, and he's all being sneaky, right? He's going through and everything. But Boba Fett seems to know he's there, right? Boba Fett, even looks over in his direction and everything as they're walking through the hall. And it suddenly dawned on me as I was, coming off of a jog. Luke had just spent some amount of time with no indoor plumbing, no shower.
This is very true.
On Dagobah for, however long, training, getting sweaty, all of that stuff. Do you think it's possible Boba Fett just smelled him?
I think it's absolutely the case because, we don't really think about this in Star Wars, but the weirdest thing about Star Wars is how people seem to wear the same clothes every single day and never wash them. And so either it's the thing where they just literally go in and you look in their closet and it's the same outfit hanging up.
Yeah, it's like Homer Simpson. Yeah.
Otherwise, although the one we know that doesn't happen is Lando because we've seen his closet. Everybody else, it's like they never change clothes, and so
that's true.
I think it's a great question because it really does. I think that's one of the things that in some ways was really helpful about the prequel trilogy was the way in which you see all of the costume changes that Padme has, all the characters, they're never really wearing the same clothes twice, except for characters like the Jedi, where they legitimately only have, they have their set of robes and those robes, it seems like, they have certain colors that they seem to pick out. And then that's their outfit, right? And they rarely kind of change out of that unless they're in a place where you need like cold weather gear or something like that. Otherwise, for the most part, they're all wearing, Jedi wear the same things, but everybody else, it's more realistic. Whereas, and I think does this bring us to the fact that during the Imperial rule, are people going without showers longer and stuff because, they're either on the run or, maybe ships aren't equipped with showers, like the AT hauler was in Solo, where it was just it's so, I don't know, man. This is a really interesting question.
Well, it's definitely a rabbit hole because it's one of those things where you're sort of like it's, as soon as it hit me. On top of that, I was thinking like, well, Yoda was there for years and years. Like, I hope he dug that pit, that he had to use well away from his little hut, just in case company showed up,
yes,
or something like that. Otherwise, there were some problems there, and probably R2 on the flight to Cloud City was grateful that he was, outside the cockpit. He's like, I'm good, I'm out here. Smell can't travel in space, but. Then, of course, my brain keeps working. So that brings on another question. All right, so Coruscant is the city planet, right? Mm-hmm. And this ties into the whole smell and filth thing. It's a city planet. Have you ever been to New York City? You've been to New York City, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
How does New York City smell? And I don't want any New York people complaining with what we're about to discuss right here, but New York City smells disgusting. It's
specifically,
awful.
Yes, in the summer when it's humid and hot there. And that's so I haven't been in there in the summer. I've been there in the fall, and the
much better.
The very early, like late winter, early springtime, and so I haven't gotten to experience the beauty of the summer where everything is very humid, very hot. It's sticky, and of course it stinks. But I've heard about it.
When you walk out of the train station, and you're like, "Hey, I'm here," it's like hitting a. You know what it's like? As long as we're talking about it, it's like going through one of those Gungan walls, one of those like shield walls.
Oh yeah,
You feel like you just passed through this slimy thing, and you're like, "Wait a minute, I'm not where I'm used to being right here." But okay, so Coruscant is basically New York as a planet. New York smells the way that it does. But can you imagine what rain was like for people on the lower levels on Coruscant? Like for moisture to come from up above where there's like breathable atmosphere and everything come pouring down. Like we have pollutants fall here on Earth, right? We can see it in ice cores and stuff like that. Can you imagine what rainfall was like for anybody that wasn't on the upper levels in Coruscant? Like how foul that was?
And it leads me to an interesting question when you think about that, because, so much of what we see in Coruscant is there gets to be this point where there is no open sky. Like in the sense that you can't see the open sky. Everything is just another city level. And so does that even happen at those levels? And the industrial complex that has to exist to create breathable atmosphere under that many layers of permacrete or whatever they call it, like that has to be the greatest engineering project of the entire galaxy.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I remember there was some concept art that I think it was first seen in like Star Wars Visions, that little trade paperback that came out back when Episode 3 was around, where there was like a vision of like green Coruscant, where it showed the uppermost levels as having like greenery, and like they basically showed that they covered that problem by having like this floating level up above that had like trees and everything, so that there could be some sort of ecosystem. But yeah, I mean, but the thing is,
that's a great question. How do they even get oxygen on the planet? Like, how do you keep oxygen on the planet if there's no, trees, there's no grass, there's nothing about this planet that is alive.
Well, wait a minute. The Jedi had those 2 trees. Maybe those were just some really great trees. The trees had midichlorian counts that you couldn't really track.
Yeah,
right?
Talk about a force of nature.
Right? Those 2 trees. Whoa, hey. See, you win the prize on this one. Nicely done. Nicely done. Nicely done.
But you set it up, so it just was like, oh, it's perfect.
You know what? There you go. That's years of podcasting right there. That's when it just naturally happens. That's the moment you're looking for, everybody. That's exactly why we do this. But yeah, it's I know you're not supposed to think about it or anything like that, but you're absolutely right. Like with the greenery and everything, I like in my brain, I'm so glad I saw that that green Coruscant concept art, so that I've applied it in my brain. I'm like, well, we didn't see the dilapidated manufacturing sector until Episode 2. It was always there. We just didn't see it. We know that we have the top of the mountain, right? That's even back in canon now.
Yeah, it is. Yep.
So that's back in canon. So there's got to be when Rick Ollier is it Ollie or Ollier? Rick Ollier, the pilot that
I think
that
it's
is,
like Rick Olay.
Rick Olay,
But I don't
Land
know.
O'Lakes.
Anyway, yeah.
Land O'Lakes.
Yeah, exactly.
Margarine. Yeah.
Yes,
But
actually, that on Naboo, he is the margarine king.
oh, wouldn't that be
So,
great?
yeah.
Oh, Rick Olay, but or could it be like oil of Olay? It's like a hand cream. Yeah. He has like a hand cream brand, and that's he just flies in his spare time. That's what he does as a hobby.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's got so much money. He's just like, I just need a job, you know?
I'll fly the queen around. What the
Yeah,
heck?
it's fine.
Yeah. We were hanging out one day. She's like, I need a pilot. I'm like, okay, that's fine.
He's like, you
But-
know what? I know how to fly. I had
Yeah.
a lot
Hey.
of lessons. I had a lot of time on my hands. I'm Rick Olay. You know, you probably use my products. In fact, you know what? I think we send them to you for free, you know, just so that we
yes.
can get the advertising.
Oh, that's the like when she has the kabuki makeup on. Like
Yes.
that's part of
how
his
she
brand
gets it
too.
off at night. You know, that's what keeps her skin looking so good.
So
We've
radiant.
nailed it.
It's true.
Anyway.
There you go. Wow. See? Potpourri. There you go, folks. But like in a part of my brain, sometimes I go back to it where it's like when he says the whole planet's one giant city, and we're all like, it's one giant city. In my brain, yes, it's quote unquote one giant city, but there is some part of it somewhere that's like undeveloped or reverted back to nature sort of thing. Like if you look at Detroit, where like all the factories have broken down, you know, to quote Ian Malcolm from another great sci-fi masterpiece, life finds a way, right? Like there's got to be sections of it where the greenery has come back with a vengeance. Unnaturally even, where like factories have broken down and all of a sudden there's moss and grass and mutant trees and everything growing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, so the biggest thing is this. Look, if the only part, at least what we know in Canada now, is the only part of the planet that you can still see is the top of the highest mountain that was ever on this planet. Let's conservatively guess it's somewhere between, Mount Rainier, which I think is 14,000 or something, and then what you got Everest? It's what 20-something thousand, right? I don't know.
Taller than I'm ever going to be.
Anyway,
that's all I can tell you.
But I mean, just think about the entire planet being covered by, and that means that this was also a planet that didn't have major oceans. So
that's a good point. You're right.
You wouldn't have been able to build an entire city planet if you had, which is another great question of like water and so I mean, the beauty of this is like you said, right? You're not supposed to think about it, but it is just kind of a crazy thought of like how this works, and I think it's one of those things where I wish that in some ways, they thought more about, I think one of the things that I really appreciate about the Andor series was the way in which, regardless of who the characters were, they weren't all wearing the same thing all the time. It was dependent on what's going on, right? Whether they're infiltrating the Imperial base there, and of course you've got the senators and their different clothing, and you've got again, unless you're part of the military, everybody's wearing something different every day because you don't wear the same things every day for the most part, and so it's just not something that necessarily gets thought about. Part of that too is I think, especially when you think of the original trilogy, the storylines that we see take place over pretty condensed time periods. Whereas when you get into like the prequels, it's a longer time period. Empire Strikes Back is a little bit longer in the sense that we don't have a conception of how long Luke is on Dagobah. Could be months.
It's as long as your brain needs him to be there.
But whereas Return of the Jedi all takes place within a few days. So whereas again, you get to the prequels and you're in a much longer time period, right? And so I think in each of the movies, right, you're not just taking place over days, but like, you know, maybe a week or two. And then, of course, you get into Clone Wars and you're talking about years.
Well, I mean,
and so,
you and I have gone back and forth about the time stuff with like Revenge of the Sith. And I think that it functions just like Empire Strikes Back. It's as long as your brain needs it to be from beginning to finish, right?
Sure. It's just my point is that the prequels themselves, for the most part, tend to cover a longer period of time. I think than you have really with the original trilogy.
Let me ask you this: do you really think Return of the Jedi takes place over the span of just a couple of days? I mean, I'm not challenging you. I'm asking. I've never really sat down and like tried to piece together as like exactly how long did it take? Because the thing is, there are gaps that can very easily happen. Because of course, you know, it's not like all of the planets at the end instantaneously knew that the Empire had fallen. Right. It took a little bit of time for the news to get all across the galaxy. It's that figurative time thing. And then also, Luke speeds away and then we transition to the Emperor showing up at the Death Star. But then there's going to be some amount of time before the fleet can gather and stuff like that.
I'm guessing, you know, when you put it like that, and I was just thinking about that idea because, you know, you get Luke going to visit Yoda and then he comes back and everything, right? You know, it's probably a couple weeks then, you know, when you think about the legitimacy of traveling and, you know, like you said, but again, too, it's like, it's pretty, it just feels, I guess it feels more compressed. You know, it feels quicker just with the way that Lucas, whereas, you know, I remember always thinking, you know, in Empire Strikes Back, you know, Luke, there's a sense that, because even just with the training montages, it's like you can see the way in which Luke is getting more proficient at certain things from, you know, when he got there to where you get there, you know, when he's doing the flips and all that kind of stuff. And then he goes into the cave and it's like, it feels like he's probably been there for a little bit, you know, and your mind doesn't have to have an exact number. So all that I think to say is that, you know, it is fascinating to me the way in which, you know, these things, and I think, you know, we were talking about on the 602 Club, Rebel Moon, the genius really, I think, of Star Wars is that unless you just are us and you're asking these questions 40 some odd years later, like your brain doesn't go there when you're watching these films, right? Your mind just, everything is designed to the point where you accept it and you kind of have an understanding of what it is, you know, whereas I felt like, you know, in Rebel Moon, that wasn't quite the case. So I'm asking a lot more questions in my mind. What's this? How does, you know, how does this all fit together? You know, and from story to design elements to everything else in Star Wars, I think things just seem to fit in a way that your brain does not have to ask those questions. It's just caught up in the go of the story, if that makes sense.
It absolutely makes sense. And that's one of the things also that I think is frustrating about, and I know I'm opening a can of worms here, okay? Because I don't want to just be like, oh, well, you know, the sequels, this and this. Because the thing is, for me, Force Awakens has that in spades up until it just grinds to a halt at Takodana. Like, and then it just never really gets its rhythm back. But like all the way up until the Starkiller Base fires, that is a tightly put together story. It's exactly the way the first six are, where it's like, I don't even have a minute to ask myself, like, well, what's this? What's, like, I could ask when I walked out, but like, boom, it just takes off, right? But Rogue One, you and I know we disagree about that, but like, it's actually inverted because it picks up so much after a certain point that I stop asking those questions. So like, it's a better situation if you will, where like in the beginning, I'm, well, wait a minute, what about this? What about that? What's going on here? And then it hits a certain point, pretty much when Saw Gerrera starts talking with Jin, where like all of a sudden I just don't care anymore. Honestly, it's probably when Chirrut shows up. Like suddenly I'm sort of like, I'm just in the flow of things again. But, is it something where, because Solo definitely recaptured it, because Solo you could go back and start like hammering at, but it goes at such a speed. And the thing is, how do they make sure that Star Wars captures that again? Right? Like, you have to have sort of like a, because I'll throw Mando season 3 on the fire there. Mm-hmm. Mando season 3 loses the thread at a certain point.
Yeah.
And it's like how do you get that quality? Because like Bad Batch has it in spades. Bad Batch is just boom, and then you can go back and pick it apart, and it still holds up.
Right.
Like it's some of the best. I
would just say just the animation in general. When you get Rebels and Clone Wars and Tales of the Jedi. So it's interesting because you were talking about Mando, and I got the 4K discs, and I just popped in the first episode just to kind of, and I haven't gotten to watch past that of the original season, and that original episode has that in spades, right? You just go, and like it knows when to slow down a little bit when you get to Queel's farm, and he learns to ride the
Blurg, right?
The Blurg.
The Blurg.
And so, I think there's something, that episode, you start with him just walking into this seedy bar, and the shot when he walks, and it, like everything about it just captures the essence of a Western, right? Which is a motif to which so many of us are familiar with. And I think maybe that's what it is. When Star Wars is at its best, it's capturing a genre, and by setting you in that genre, but within Star Wars, you don't have to ask questions because your brain fills in the gaps, right? And again, this is, I think, the difference between this and something like, a Rebel Moon. Mm-hmm. I'm not just within a specific genre with that, because it feels like a lot of different genres crammed together, and it depends on which scene you're in to what genre you might be. Whereas, Star Wars, it was like the original films were the serials, and the other 3 were serials, and then it's like the Clone Wars pick up on this idea of, okay, now we're doing shorter episodes that are going to be based on serials, but they're also going to be based on different genres. And then you had Mandalorian pick up the whole idea of like, we're legit just going to be the Western version of Star Wars. And, it's like, I think that might be one of the keys to making a good Star Wars thing. It's like you have to pick your genre and then run with it. Because, again, Solo runs with that, right? Because it's the gangster movie. We all have an understanding of like the gangster thing. I think, Rogue One gets it because it's kind of the war spy movie. And maybe that's one of the things where you don't connect with it as much, because at the beginning of the movie, it's a little bit more like a spy movie, and it kind of throws itself into a war movie fully by the end. And so I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Let's not re-prosecute this argument.
You're still wrong on it, but it's not. I'm just wondering if that's the case, because they are kind of mixing two genres. Listen, I'm not trying to have that fight, because you kept talking about serials, and all my brain just goes, somebody still has the recipe for C-3POs. Why hasn't Disney re-released that cereal? I don't know. What about the cereal in Andor? They literally have cereal. Why didn't you make that? I'm a big cereal fan, too. See? I am, too. I love cereal, like Lucky Charms. Come on. Well, wait a minute. No, but like, seriously, whatever happened to that? Like, there was Batman cereal.
There was Star Wars cereal.
They did have Mando cereal. I have the box.
Wait, they did?
They brought out Mando cereal when it first came out, and it's actually good. It was like it was a combination of Lucky Charms and like Kix. It was actually pretty good for a cereal based off a show, which most of those tend to suck. This was actually good.
You know, my memory of C-3POs was not particularly enjoying them. And I can promise you that Batman cereal, I have a vague memory of it. It was sort of like, well, let's just say that I have a preserved box of it. If the Armageddon ever happens, I'm going to crack it open because why the hell not? It was made by Ralston, the dog food manufacturer. So
you know it's good. Quality.
They were trying. Well, they know something about mass production there, Matt, and dry cereal. So kind of a natural fit
with real seafood bits.
You know, hey,
Admiral Akbar cereal.
your taste buds can't repel flavor of this
that
magnitude. Oh man! See, this is fun though. Is breaking apart a couple of things like this. It's going a little free form. Matt, I love that you went on the journey with me. I'm so happy. I hope everybody stayed on it with us as we sat here and had a little bit of fun. Tell you what, reach out to us on those social channels. Let us know. Do you like these episodes? It's something a little different. We could do a couple of these a year, that sort of thing. Let us know. Reach out to us on X, Twitter, whatever it's called now, at the Jedi Masters. And Matt, where can people find you lurking on the internet?
Yeah, all over social media under the name Matt Rushing 02. Here on the network, you can find me in a completed show called Owl Post with Dre Kaufman, talking about every single chapter of the Harry Potter series. And over on the Nerd Party Network, a bunch of shows. Of course, the 602 Club we mentioned here. John and I just recently kicked off 2024 with that show. Is talking about Rebel Mood and also doing literary treks, The Orb, Warp 5, Artificial Tangle, and Saddle Up. But John, if people wanted to see, maybe what cereal you are, really enjoying these days, where would people find you?
Oh my gosh, I cheat on my cereals. I can't stay with one particular type. It's actually kind of a sickness, to be honest with you. It's an addiction, if you will, one that I've never been able to overcome, and one that I gleefully indulge in. But you can find me at Kessel Junkie online, and you can find me, appearing occasionally on 602 Club, but also you can find me right here on the network, co-hosting a show called House Lights with Tristan Riddell and Darren Moser, where we have quite a time looking at the work of different directors and all of those sorts of things. Well, Matt, I just heard the chime for Cereal Hour at the Jedi Temple. I think it's time to close these negotiations.
John, with this in the cereal bar, negotiations are closed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.